Hey everybody, welcome back. Last bit of info dump for you before we get into some actual demos, I suppose. But we're going to wrap this up with jQuery. Now, jQuery is one of the, at least to me, one of the more popular client-side development frameworks that are out there. Obviously, it's probably been superseded by bigger frameworks like React or Angular, where there's more backend present as well. Plus, they give you some of the nice front end manipulations. But if you just have pure front end, client side development to do, there is absolutely nothing wrong with going with a library such as jQuery. And it has been around for quite a while now, honestly. And it's gotten very, very powerful. I don't know, I'm not presenting. I should have been. Um, it's gotten very feature rich. And honestly, the biggest thing with jQuery and why you would use this over, say, raw JavaScript is that it's delightfully cross-platform, meaning that something that I write with jQuery should function exactly the same in every browser that supports modern JavaScript. That's kind of why this came along a while back and why it became so popular, because again, JavaScript would be handled differently in IE versus, sorry, I should expand that, Internet Explorer, that which shall not be named, versus Firefox versus Safari versus Chrome versus Navigator, all these different ones. Anyway, it's cross-browser, which is great. It's also very customizable. There are a ton of plugins out there for you. When we pop over to the jQuery site, for instance, you see kind of the basics, but they also have mobile applications. There's Sizzle, which is a bit for CSS. There's also jQuery UI, which is, I'll kind of show you a quick snippet here. But if you want to develop an entire user interface using jQuery, can't really go wrong because stuff like this is a pain in the butt to code by yourself. And yeah, I like it when other people do the work for me, obviously. But it also makes DOM manipulation very easy. Last video, we looked at document.getElementById and some of those other ones. Here, it becomes even easier, honestly. And because it's so mature and it's been around for so long, there's a really big community of developers out there working with it, able to answer questions and lots of tutorials, lots of resources basically, which is great for a web developer. You're not, doing something that you have no idea how to handle. Okay, so how do we use it? It is a library. In the excuse me, in the demo video, I'll show you, using jQuery inside of JS Fiddle. But if you want to use it on your own machine or on your cloud server, you could either download it and use it locally. I tend to like the minified versions because they're a little bit smaller. Um, Usually it's like jQuery.min.js, or you could point to the, one of the CDNs that are out there that are hosting the JavaScript file. And I've got a link here where basically I've just kind of popped this into my working demo, save it. Again, we don't need a web server to run just a basic JavaScript page. So here's my, lovely demo from probably a couple videos back at this point. And let's fix this stuff. No, let's put this back in. We'll have some fun with it. All right, so everything's hot pink, delightful. I'll leave my console open here. And I've got jQuery loaded. So what I can do now, just to give you a little taste of the syntax, I could say, let me show you the syntax. So I'll talk about it and then we'll write the code. In my existing demo here, I've got window.onload equals function init. This is handling the onload event. jQuery's is $document.ready some function inside of that. Effectively the same thing. So what I can do here, let's see what happens when we step on existing code. I honestly have never been crazy enough to do it this way. Function alert. Hi. Refresh. Hi. Perfect. So jQuery, raw JS. Maybe I'll even share this with you later. We'll see. So kind of the key here is that still JavaScript code, just using the library, obviously. We can mix and match JavaScript to jQuery if we want. But first key here, either we use it locally, linked to a CDN. You can also use npm to install it and run it as a Node.js type of situation. It's got a little pukey face here because I don't like npm. That's just me though. It makes things bloated, but it's also super useful. So we'll talk about that when we get to React and Node and fun stuff like that. But if you're just doing jQuery, you could use it. If you don't need npm, you could just do this too. Anyway, let's start playing with jQuery a bit. So this basically replaces the document.get blah 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 by blah 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 syntax with just a $, and then the selector inside of parentheses, then a dot, and then some action. And this is basically just kind of an abstraction on top of our existing calls. And again, that abstraction is hiding all the cross-browser stuff and customizable stuff. Basically, it's just some generic function that we're calling. So $this is referring to the current element. $P in quotes references every single paragraph element. And I would highly recommend checking out all the various selectors that are out there because there's a lot of them. And you can play with all the different DOM elements, and we'll get into that as well. So let's do an Unclick event here. Here I've got my various elements. Now let's say $title dot click function. The syntax is a little bit like there's a lot more parentheses and curly braces, but once you start using it, and especially if you use something like VS Code, all the auto completion makes life a little bit easier. Let's say alert this dot HTML. That should work. I love doing raw demos where I have no preconceived notions here. Good, it worked. I wasn't sure if it needed the braces or the parentheses. So what I did here was I added an Unclick event to the title. Okay, so $. Again, here's my selector here. I've just got a pound title, and this is the equivalent of document.getElementById title. So this here, what does this point to? Well, it points to this element, right? And then click, this is the Unclick event. So I would say, this dot, document.getElementById title.onClick equals alert, basically. Here, kind of truncated this a touch, got my alert, and then this little cheeky line inside of here is just grabbing the inner HTML content of this particular field. So, trying not to string too many things together here for you, but just showing you that I can add an Unclick event with jQuery just as easily as I can with, document.getElementById. And then you see this little violation here. Click handler took too long. Basically, jQuery's taking its sweet time handling events apparently. But again, I'm going to have associated links with a lot of these jQuery functions that we'll be looking at. Like I could double click instead of single click. So let's actually take a look at that. Instead of .click, it's double click, refresh, single click, nothing happens, double click, it works. So again, a little bit more flexibility here. If I were to do that with normal JavaScript, I'd have to add like a timer, track 2 separate clicks. It'd be kind of a pain, right? Hopefully, right? Okay, but jQuery gives you some nice ease of access, ease of use. Again, your homework will kind of walk you through some of this as well. But where jQuery really kind of shone early in the web was it gave you all kinds of cool effects, which made your page really, really neat. So here I've got fade out. So let's do that now. I'm going to comment this out, and let's say this dot fade out. All right. So what's happening here is that whenever this element, whatever it is clicked, have this abstract function get called, and then I'm going to fade out whatever this element is. So let me refresh now. Click, nothing happens. It's still double click. Goodbye. And it completely removes it from, current usage here. You actually see all the other elements slide up to take its place. So, and I don't think I can get it back because I didn't put it on toggle, but it's gone. So this is one of the other things that is pretty popular in, web design, is having hidden stuff magically appear. So here's another Dr. Engelsma example where I've got, paragraph, I'm hiding something, click me to see it. So, hey, there it is. Here's the secret I was hiding. So basically what happened is when this particular ID is clicked, call the slide down, which basically kind of unhides this thing. All right, so let me run that again. Click, slides down. That's tied to this particular function here, and it's going to run slow. There's different, attributes that you could slide in there for for different speeds, different aesthetic effects, things like that. Key here, though, if you are doing this, just something to keep in mind. All of this is completely viewable in the dev tool, so don't put like super secret things in here that you don't want anybody to find, because again, we just open the dev tools or right click and look at the source code. It's right there. Other things that we can do. So I showed you that .html in the parentheses. That's basically getting the HTML content of some field if it's empty. If I have something inside of it, it's going to set that. Text will set the raw text value. So, before I showed you, document.get element by id dot inner text versus inner HTML. It's kind of the same thing. I'll show you in a minute. Also can update values for form fields, set attributes. So if we want to change things around about the elements themselves, let's take a look at the actual, our little double click thing here. So I want to change the title. Let's change it from ha 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 to, and I'm going to still use this .html. Let's do em. Hi. Last video of the day. Creativity is definitely gone in naming things. All right, so we're back. Double click. Oh, yeah, it's a nice hi. So again, HTML will parse out these tags. If I change this to text, we're going to see these EM tags appear, and we don't want that, right? So it's setting raw text values. It's not parsing out our HTML in there. And again, if I wanted to just get the content, I would just kind of remove the parenthesis or the parameter there, and then I could say alert just to figure out how to get this. Double click, pops up as an alert. If I don't want this to be shown, I could do console.log, double click, pops up here. Basically, we have different ways to, get and set data is kind of the key takeaway here. All right, another example. Let's do another JS fiddle here. So change content of all P elements, boring HTML. So we have a button, we have a div with an ID, and what's going to happen is that when this button is clicked, okay, so this is something we're talking about too. So I changed it to bold, right? So I run this, changes to bold. This is an interesting thing to kind of point out with HTML and selectors and things like that. So I've got a div here. So this is a div, and I can say div pound replace me. So this is basically going to specify that this thing has to be a div element. It can't be a paragraph with the ID replace me. It can't be an anchor tag with the ID replace me. So let me show you here really quickly. Let me change this to a P. Change this to a P. It's going to look slightly different. Well, I guess it's not. Click, nothing happens, right? This doesn't match anymore. This is basically looking for div pound replace me, right? I change this to a P because this is now a p tag up here. Now it'll work. Okay. Interestingly, oh, wait. Didn't happen before. .html. Huh. Okay, well, that's neat. It's a fun little thing. Apparently it's appending there. If I change this to a span, what does that do? It's not ideal, but let's see what happens. That works. Maybe it's something about the double p tag, and it's ignoring the p. Love seeing interesting behaviors in live demos. I guess kind of the key takeaway here is that this particular script that's running when the document loads, when you click the button, execute this particular line. And what this line is going to do is it's going to search for a div with the ID replace me .html, which means use the inner HTML property to actually put in this particular block of HTML code here. I could do a dot for this to be a class as well if I wanted. So let's do that. Okay. Change this back to a div, back to div, back to div. Change this to a class, change this to a class, and change this to a dot. And the nice thing is that we don't have to loop through every single instance. If you remember before, I had to loop through every single element when I got document.get tags by name. Here it's just going to kind of do that automatically for me. So I can put, 500 of these because it's a class. That's the purpose. It should apply to 2 or more elements generally. There we go. So other things we can do, we could append, we could prepend, so you're putting stuff before or after. We can insert content before or after elements. Basically, we have lots of different, kind of things that we can play with here. We can also remove content. We don't just have to add it. So nice thing here is that we have the possibility to play with children elements or just the child elements and the parent, excuse me. So for instance, like if I had a div tag with paragraph with I with em inside of that, and I said item.remove, it's going to take that element and get rid of it and all of its children. If I want to clear it out but leave that tag there, I would just call empty. So I guess I'll give you another, kind of example of that because, well, let's override this one so I don't have to redo everything. Say button ID equals click me, click to me, perfect. And then I've got a div, ID equals div, em, p, hi there. Let's put this in a paragraph tag. Just kind of messing around. So here's my beautiful element. And let's say div, let's give it a border, 1px solid, $000. Now my div has a border here, and I'm going to give my paragraph, let's give the paragraph background of teal. Let's hit the wrong button. And there we go. Okay, just the CSS was to delineate. So paragraph has a background, the div has a border. And if I say $click me.click function, okay. If I said $div.empty, what we're going to see is this thing still exists, right? So you still see that border there. If I were to call remove, so it's going to remove the element and its children. So let's run this again. Line goes away, so the div is gone, basically. Key here, do you want to remove the element or everything inside the element? Okay, other things we can do, I'm going to start zipping through this a bit. So we can add or remove classes. We can toggle classes, meaning that if we have added it, toggle will then remove it. You call toggle again, it will add that class back and remove and add. Basically, you're flipping a binary flag on or off. We could set CSS attributes, things of that. Basically, we just have lots of different things that we can play with. Play with text, play with class, all of these different functions and attributes that we have. One other thing to kind of mention too, so we have size that we can play with as well. So if you've ever opened up the DevTools, and hopefully you have by now, you might have seen a picture kind of like this, right? So this is our box sizing model for a browser. If you have some elements, so here is my element, so let's call this a div or a paragraph tag. It's going to have different sizes applied to it. So the padding, let me open up trusty old Paint here. So let's say that I've got, is this visible? Hopefully this is visible. Okay, too much stuff. So here I've got yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Hello, CIS658. Okay, so here is my text here. So this is going to be my paragraph tag, right? The element itself is inside of a box. So if I make this bigger so that I can actually see what I'm doing, right? So when I define this particular tag, maybe this is a span, okay? Because it's not going to be full width. So this is the element here. Here's its border. If you were to set a border for an element, it would look something like this. But, should have drawn this bigger. This area here is going to be your padding. Okay, so the distance from the box side to the whatever's inside of it, this is your padding. Okay, so you're going to have a left to top, a right and a bottom padding. The distance from the element to other elements is its margin. All right, so if you want things to be kind of spaced in between each other, so if I had, no, don't do that, do that. So if I've got this guy here, and I put another one in, I would have a margin from here to here. So this is the margin size. This from here to here is the padding. Just depends on the style you want to get, but that's what basically this model here is showing you. Okay, so here's our border for some objects. The padding is the distance from the border to the content inside. Margin's the distance from the border to other things. Why am I talking about this? Well, one, I haven't really mentioned it. I can't remember if we talked about it during CSS or not, but you can play with this with JavaScript and with jQuery specifically. So you can play with the width and the height of your element. So width is going to be the size of the element inside. The inner width is going to be the distance from the inside of the border, the inside of the border from one end to the other. The outer width is the distance from the outside of the border. And then, margin, size, height are all going to follow very similar things here. Key is that when you start laying things out on your page, you might want to have different margin sizes. Maybe when you click a button, it makes it grow massively for, whatever size you make it. And then that possibly throws off other elements. So you have to update all their margins or paddings or what have you. Key here is that these are all available to you. All right, so then the last little demo here, so our last JS fiddle. So we've got a nice little blue box here and a button to resize the box. Now this box is 10 pixels by 10 pixels in total. And when I click this button, it's going to resize that div to 200 pixels, right? So two things here. So we have our document.ready, our button.click, hopefully old hat by now. We have a kind of cascading function call type of situation going on here. So I'm going to get this div, right? So it's still by ID because you see the pound sign. I'm going to call div.width 200. So it's first going to resize by width, and then it's going to resize by height. So basically this is going to be called first, and then this is going to be called. But it's going to just kind of happen one after the other based on how quickly things get updated. So we have just changed the raw width. Anyway, so the key is that we can resize things pretty easily. So that is going to be pretty much it in terms of jQuery. I mentioned this jQuery UI a bit earlier. If you want to generate user interfaces, you want your web application to be very feature rich and very pleasant for the user to experience, you could hand roll it yourself, or you could generate it through jQuery UI. So they have a theme roller, for instance, where I could set the font, I could set the corner radius of everything to say 10. You see things kind of getting round here. You have a header. Oh, what's the color of the header? Oh, let's make it textured. Let's make it red. Okay, so now we have like a gradient thing going on here. Okay, that should have updated somewhere. Okay, there we go. It didn't hit enter. So it's pink and it's textured. What's clickable? So basically you kind of see that there are lots of different things that we can do. Plus you get icons, and you, again, probably have done this in things like Bootstrap already. If you played with it, probably know you get icons with that. But another way that you could add some flair to your various applications. So date picker, progress bar, menus, tooltips, all kinds of fun stuff. Anyway, I will let you play with that. What we're going to be talking about in the next demo is how Jquery and Ajax work together. Got a couple links for you here to check out, but basically this is just how we get the client side to talk to the server side without refreshing anything. But we'll talk about that next time. See you all then. Bye, everybody.